Do big shield units got you down? Wish you had some hefty swings to clear a path for you? Or maybe just love animations that have a lot of weight to them? Well, don't worry, because in today's video, we're going to be talking all about Haru and how she has performed so far. So welcome to the channel, everybody. My name is Cosmic, and this is going to be our overview for Haru and my thoughts on her for those who may be free to play and if you should pull on her or not between now and the end of the banner. Now, as you saw in the opening, I do want to be upfront. As typical in every other gacha game, there are going to be content that is focused around what Haru can do. Not only do we see a lot of shield heavy units towards the end of the story as well as the last planet, there are just going to be a lot of focus on, well, the dimensional dusk, which we just got access to, that also favors single target attacks. So it is no surprise that Haru is going to feel a lot better right now than she may feel if we go to season 1, and then, well, it'll be a new banner character. So again, this is typical, but what are my thoughts overall on her so far? Well, I am but a simple person, and I love big, heavy swings, again, that feel like they have some weight to them, some great animations, and, well, when you get that crit, and of course, as we get to build out her a little bit more with the proper memory fragments, I think that she will be a very solid character. However, the downside that I want to add is that, well, her cards do take a little bit of time to build up. Most of the epiphanies for her are going to require very specific setups, which are going to take multiple turns. And when we consider things like the dimensional dawn or dusk, you just don't have the time to do so. So unfortunately, she does lag a little bit in that regard. Now, at the time of recording this, I am just starting off of my dimensional dusk, so I haven't gone all the way to, like, 30 star or what have you, but I can at least speak to the epiphanies so far that I've been playing, and they do take a little bit too much time. So again, in today's video, we're going to break this down, go through every single category, give you some team recommendations, and finalize with just my thoughts at the very end. But if that all sounds good to you, make sure to like and subscribe for future Chaos Zero Nightmare content, because that does help the channel out a ton. And again, I've just been blown away by the reception that we've gotten so far with the channel, so it is very much appreciated. But with that out of the way, let's dive into the actual cards, because this is where you're going to be spending most of your time and just where the epiphanies ultimately matter. So Haru, as you saw in the opening, is all about either her anchor shot or her ego skill, which are just going to be these massive damage nukes. Now, one thing to note is that the base version of anchor shot does take time to charge up, but it becomes a very nice AP investment for the amount of damage that you're going to be getting. I personally will always love this first anchor shot that you have that gives you the 90 damage ramp and just provides some absolutely insane numbers. However, when we look kind of across the rest of these and what's available to us, again, largely there is a focus about either using it multiple times, making sure that we're getting the right setups for the absolutely crazy off-the-wall thing that you can be doing with the anchor shot in the middle. You could pair this with, for example, Renoa, who gets all of her dirge bullet backs, and then you could discard all the dirge bullets to the anchor shot and just have absolutely insane, funny meme number turns, right? Which is really cool that we do get to see that for a combatant, but otherwise this is going to want to be in a more retain heavy focus style of build, which of course can be achieved through the more neutral cards and other combatants, but that's going a little bit outside. We'll get into the team conversation here in a bit. But for me personally, this is where I start to see her struggle just a little bit. Again, as I mentioned, we do have to consider things like the dimensional dawn and dusk, and really the amount of turns that we're going to have access to. And because we're using two different teams, right, we are going to have a very limited opportunity to cast anchor shot over and over. So for that reason, if we think about what is the absolute overall, well, best for Haru, it's actually going to be the combo with getting an extra hit. We want to just be more consistent with as much damage as we can, and a effectively 600%. I do have this buffed up a little bit with her potentials, which we'll cover shortly. Getting effectively a 600% damage hit with 2 AP is a very good number to hit. Plus, you can bring this back with Anchor Shot. And when we're matching this with things like Mika to give us the extra action points, or if we have neutral cards that are going to buff this up even more, then that's where you're really going to start to see the damage come together. So while there are some cool combinations you can do with some of the other ones, either if you want to do full-on combos with Renoa and heavy retain stuff to spike damage in a turn, which you certainly could do, and it may be worth evaluating if this card can be good for your account overall, the one in the middle. I always personally love the heavier anchor shot, just because, as you saw in the opening, 2,000 plus, and that's not even like a finished build or anything. That number should easily be able to go to 3K or 4K off a single hit. But at least for my recommendation, given the limitations around turns, given the priority of just getting high hitting damage and then getting out, I would definitely recommend the second or third anchor shot. The third one I really do like a lot just because it does create extra copies. But again, with how many turns that we have to really utilize, and because you can filter through your deck with a lot of high draw combatants like Veronica and like Mika being able to get even Rally, which is another great card for drawing, you can reliably just, go on with the double hit, and that would be the one that I recommend. Moving on from there, we are going to have Anchor Pointer, which this one is really funny because as I had in the video, I'll just give the spoiler, we have one that gains vulnerable for one of the more neutral epiphanies that you can get. So also keep in mind, all these can either have God cards or neutral epiphanies to them. So this one does come down to a little bit of what do you ultimately want to rely on. For their base values, what I personally have really liked is the Anchor Pointer, and then trying to copy it if you can that has Retrieve. Retrieve allows you in a single turn to be able to double cast it, meaning every copy of it is going to guarantee 2 anchor point hits, and this of course does count towards combo as well. So one of the better things that you can be doing is the anchor point with Retrieve into the combo hit anchor shot, and that's going to be your most consistent damage turn over turn. So this is where we're getting more into the save data conversation where, yes, you want to copy cards where you can. That is something that you'll want to be aware of, and it does get a little bit easier as you're getting up into the later stages. The rest of these certainly do have some versatility to them. Of course, getting if you have multiple copies, you can also get value out of the plus 20% damage one. But ultimately, with some refinement, with some artifacts, we should have enough crit rate and crit damage that we don't need to rely on the other ones. And the anchor shot gaining retain isn't as important. We can line that up with another card in a following turn. But generally speaking, I always prioritize finding the anchor shot that just gives us more casts of the card itself. Power Charge isn't necessarily one that is key to her kit, but it is a very good damage nuke for what it does. Interestingly to note, if you are going into heavy AoE stages and you just want the attack weakness to attack their tenacity bar, you do have that as an option. For these, personally, what I always like to do is the Power Charge that is going to get extra damage, just because you'll find yourself in a situation where it's very easy to clear out the ads, and then you're just trying to do as much damage as possible up front to the enemy. So I do like the Power Charge. It just gives you extra damage, although I was not too upset the times I got the Power Charge with the attack weakness, because again, that can have its own value, especially if you're trying to bring this into, say, a World 2 or Chaos 2, I should say, with Kalipe, and just breaking as much as possible that way, right? One of the key teams with Haru is going to be Kalipe, so if you're building that way, I would recommend the attack weakness, because then that is going to be, hey, this is my Haru that I'm using very specifically for Chaos 2, and that's the save data that I'm chasing. So this is also another note that I'll just very quickly add. The reason why I've waited so long to make this video is that every single save data ultimately you're going for in the various epiphanies can be for very different teams. So that is very quickly a disclaimer that I want to make, because as I get into more of the team combination, show off some of the other cards, right? You have to keep in mind that this is just at a base level. Which epiphanies would I choose? Why are they good? This is before we get even to any of the neutral cards and everything that those can provide. So I do want to recommend, at least at a high level, I'm going to revisit Haru probably another week from now once I get further on into the Zero system. And we'll probably have even crazier lists to talk about from the save data that we were able to put together. But overall, if I'm looking for more of a, boss killer style of Haru, I would definitely recommend the image on the left. Again, the first one here, which is getting extra damage, versus if I want something that's going to be more AoE focused, it's going to be really good for Chaos 2. That's where we can use the Power Charge 2. Moving on from there with the Charge Energy, just being the last one. This one is interesting because the damage itself, I keep going back, unless they patched it, as of at least, last night, by number of cards in hand only retains to her in particular. So while yes, this is again a card that combos, and notably it's going to give us plus 140% attack with the combo anchor shot that I talked about initially, this is something that I'm curious to see if they're going to update it, if it's a text area, it's a bug, what have you. But this is just to say we want a damage boosting effect for the anchor shot, especially because if we go for the double hit, right, every hit is giving you an extra value for that effect. Again, if you are looking for more of tenacity breaking, maybe we find later on a boss that has a very high tenacity bar and you're just trying to break it because of either a mechanic or what have you, then the second one can come in handy. But this is, again, if you're going for the multi-hit anchor shot, you definitely want to focus on finding one of them that is going to increase your damage. But if you are instead going for the high damage impact, I would actually just go for the charge energy, thin out your deck, remove a card from it, and just get a flat plus 20% damage, because you are going to be using things like Veronica and Mika to churn through your deck as fast as possible, find those anchor shots, and just keep looping them. So every upgrade that you have or every piece of removal that you can get out of the deck, right, is going to help out a lot with the synergy of being able to churn through the deck fast. And then last but not least, Lift Anchor, again, just being a really good card here for being able to give us the extra combo hit. This is another card that can give a plus 140 effectively when we combo with the, I keep saying combo, but the combo anchor, right, to get an extra hit because it's a zero cost that plays into it and just allows you to slam it accordingly. So this is something that you're going to want to be aware of as you're figuring out the save data that you want to be doing. And then lastly, just the Power Strike Ego. Damage by number of beneficial effects owned. This is a very long-winded way to say, short to say 7 to 8 buffs is usually what I have on. Once I'm fully stacking my characters, I have all the various buffs. I have some upgrades. This is just a single damage nuke that, of course, if you're going against enemies that are weak to justice, it just becomes another anchor shot very quickly, it feels like, especially if you have the vulnerability to buff this even more. So one thing to keep in mind when you're playing Haru, in all instances of Haru, you are going to want to find neutral cards that give you stacks of vulnerability. Moving into our partners, and this is just from a what I have perspective, we have the Rito, which is pretty straightforward because it just gives you plus damage to the card that you want to be using, in this case plus 10. But then also notably, it does have the Ego skill, which is going to give you 3 morale, which is also great for the multi-hit. So again, that is going to become plus 60 damage, which over 2 hits is going to be plus 120. So for a 2-cost Ego skill, this is actually very, very good for her multi-hit. And then again, keep in mind, because this is a buff, it's also going to count towards her Ego skill. Now, I do have to go back to it just again for the sake of making sure that we cover it, because I am not pulling for partners, but we have to recognize that, yes, the 5-star partner is absolutely insane. If Haru is your favorite thing ever, be my guest, go ahead and pick this up. We are going to have the Ego skill here, Light of Arc, 20% damage of the next attack used by the assigned combatant for the total cost of all cards in hand, max 10. This is just the best damage nuke that you could possibly ask for. And then, of course, right above it, flat damage increase, and then also plus 10% damage of the assigned combatant's pulverized cards, meaning you get an additional 10% of the damage on top of anchor shot. So this is very, very, very good for her. Again, it's going to be your signature partner. It is what I would expect. Do I think it is worth the free-to-play player to really get this? Absolutely not. While yes, it is a nice upgrade, I think you can do absolutely fine by the 4-star. Of course, the 5-star is always going to be better, but at least in a game like Chaos Zero Nightmare, you have to remember that this is a game that's going to want you to have multiple characters. So it really comes down to, do I want a partner banner where I get that 5-star partner, or should I save those gems for a future character that is going to round out my team better? It allows me to have an easier time with content while still getting 4-star partners that are very good. At least for me, for the sake of a free-to-play lens, I have to always recommend, focusing on what it is of just the 4 stars. Now that I will stress, if you are someone who is a little bit more limited on what you're spending, I have to just give a slight caveat here to NUKES and the Battle Pass. If there is a single thing that you spend money on that is going to significantly smooth out your play experience, this NUKES partner is absolutely insane. And while it doesn't go with Haru in particular, because it's not Haru's class, this is going to be insanely good for helping you find those anchor shots and increase the consistency of your deck. And this isn't just for Haru, this is for every future combatant as well. So if there's one thing that you're going to spend a light spend, $10 on, and if you can get to it, I would strongly recommend getting NUKES here, because unfortunately her partner that it does go for her is just not as good. Yes, it's nice to have the 8% HP increase, but it's only for characters that are in a break state, and generally you are doing your one big swing with Haru, and that puts them into the break state where, yes, maybe your follow-up gets there on the second anchor shot, but it's just not as consistent, where for, again, me personally, I like just relying on the standard 4-star, get the job done, and the partner is very good at what it wants to be doing. Again, the fact that this synergizes so well with the anchor shot combo as well as her ego skill, this is just a very, very strong 4-star to rely on. Now, I do want to talk about save data just a little bit in terms of, cards to look out for. Trumpet of Revelation, I do want to give a quick shout out for in World 5 because this is insanely good when you are drawing off of the anchor pointer, which does count. But also keep in mind, as you're playing this with like Mika, you are going to have cards like Rally in your deck. So this is just a flat 20% draw effect that you can very consistently trigger. You can see in the opening video what I was using it for. And then the other one is just, plus 15% damage. Again, this is all being Chaos 5, so just something that we have overall. Now, for our save data, you will notice that, again, I talked about having a replicated, let me actually just click on the replicated one, right? We did copy Anchor Shot, and even better, it did have a vulnerable buff on it for us. So while it is nice to get like the retain if you go for other setups, this is, for me personally, what I would call at least one of the ideal setups so far, because that vulnerability stack is going to be very nice for increasing the damage that we're doing off of our bigger hits. Otherwise, for this run, it wasn't that notable. So that is the one downside of, I have not been lucky to get good save data for Haru yet. The anchor shots have been good. There have been, runs where I get massive amounts of damage and I get to do really cool stuff. And again, like the opener that you saw, but ultimately I have been a little bit behind in what was available to us and what was overall good. Now, this does lead me into the team conversation that I want to talk about just from a high level. Always keep in mind who is on your team and who's going to benefit the most from some of these god attributes. I was doing a run with Kalipe because I just needed the survivability, and having Resolve 3 on this while also planning for more of an AoE centric team was honestly insane role for a god upgrade that we got. So overall, this is a okay AoE based build, but again, this was just the very first one that we got to play and got to experience with. Again, we had some other save datas which just weren't all that great. This one, because we're gonna have a higher hand with retain count, we can always get the plus 20% damage, which is nice. Very easy to trigger that. I don't think I had anything else that was really notable as some of these I was going through. This was just a test build, which actually I need to delete later. So where does that bring us to potentials? So one thing I do want to note, because there was some confusion on my last video, ignore this 10 out of 10. Do not comment on it. Do not look at it. Just please completely ignore it. As I was starting off, and as I thought with Haru's kit overall, she has two basic cards that say plus 10% anchor shot damage, that it's a buff, right, that you're going to be using. I thought that there would be a opportunity for us to combo this in and get value out of these basic cards, where in reality, as the game has turned out, as we get to what I'm going to call the mid game at this point, I am almost never casting these cards because I have so much draw power to go through my deck that I am going to find either Anchor Shot or Anchor Pointer to go the distance. And one thing I will just clarify for the sake of the video, not to get too much into her build, but for example, this is the Veronica build that I'm doing. I have a double copy of Repose, which also applies Weaken, which is really nice. Draw 2 cards. So again, it won't draw her own cards. It'll always draw into Mika or Kalipe, or excuse me, and Haru. And then I also have the, where's the Cirkulowski, which is also a draw 2. And I'm combining this with the Mika save file that has double rally, plus it also has a morale, and then this one was just still the vanilla. So you can start to see where we are just drawing a bunch of cards, and we are very, very, very consistently getting that trumpet buff turn after turn to get the plus 20% extra damage. So that is a long-winded way again for me to say, do not focus on this first node. I wouldn't even focus on the second node not being important. Your node priority should always be 3-1, because this is going to be a very cheap upgrade. It's going to give you a nice damage boost. The next one that you should really focus on is going to be the 4th node, which is going to give you unique card damage increase. And so what that one is, again, going back to her Anchor Shot, if I go back to her Anchor Shot, this is considered a unique card for the sake of being buffed. So always make sure that when you're thinking about where to put that investment, that for potentials, you want to make sure this is upgraded. And then for the last two, we have Anchor and Power Anchor, which is just her base attacks. I don't really care for this one. Again, sure, because it's a lower investment for the weekly, but 26 of the blue crystals is very, very expensive right now. I personally, again, would just focus on the unique card upgrade. And then the last one is the Haru's Anchor Shot, which also is not, 10%, it's, excuse me, a 20%, which is really nice. So for me personally, this is going to take a little bit with 36, and keep in mind that you have to go through the critical chance and critical damage, but these 4 nodes at the end are really going to be your most important ones. Now, again, keep in mind at the time of recording this, I do not have 1,000 attack yet. I do need to upgrade her stats, but I'm ballparking around like 700 to 800 attack. So I can't even make use of this last node yet. Now, once I get up to difficulty 6, I'm able to refine it a little bit more, have better memory fragments and all that stuff. Sure, we'll eventually get there, but unfortunately right now we are a little bit short. That does lead me to my next point of memory fragments. So perhaps no surprise, because the memory fragments are very straightforward. We are going to be using Line of Justice. That is going to be our 4-set bonus. And then for the mid game, I would strongly recommend just using Blackwing. You're not going to really have enough crit rate and crit damage to get the most out of the other plus 25% crit damage set. So just going for raw value increase is going to be good until you can min-max your build a little bit better. And you will most likely want to be farming the void piece that this is attached to. So that does work out quite well. Now, here I will include a image that just very quickly breaks down, what I would prioritize. And again, this is more of a late game focus. So do take this with a grain of salt. This is all things perfect, all things, we're able to min-max our substats, all that good stuff. That is how I expect that she will want to be built. However, again, keep in mind on the left-hand side, these are all going to be your more static abilities. So flat health, flat defense, flat attack. On the right-hand side, you're going to have things like the plus attack. We did get a justice damage line here, which again is, desire, which is going to be, the best in slot 4 for amping the damage. And then unfortunately for this one, I just have a health piece. I don't have an attack piece, which would be really nice. Or depending on how much it matters, I could also see a ego recovery here, but most likely this will just end up being attack. So again, lots of attack boosting attributes that we could go into, but for right now, just get what you can for your memory fragments. Upgrading some of them is ideal if you have the extra resources, but this will be more of the end game grind that we can expect of trying to min-max your crit rate and crit damage. So Haru is one of my main damage dealers that I'm going to continue to upgrade as I'm farming through Zero System, because I just really love her kit and the big meaty swings. Is she the best? No, but she does have a very good spot right now, and she does make farming Chaos 5 a lot easier, so I do think that is very good. Now, the last thing I want to address is the massive elephant in the room that is her second awakening ability, right? If you've caught the podcast, or if you saw other content creators, other messages, what have you, there is a little bit of a disclaimer here for, it is very good and unlocks potentially a different play style for her, which is a little bit annoying. Anchor Shot can be used even without sufficient cost. Cards used with this effect consume all remaining AP for every 1 AP less than the original amount, cost minus 40% damage. Now, this is really important for the combo aspect that we talked about, but also, again, just aligns a much more consistent damage piece with only losing effectively 40 damage in this case, right? Because you're going to cast it when you're at 1 action point, the vast majority of the considerations, because there has been multiple times on stream at this point that, well, Mika did not generate AAP for us, or we didn't draw into the right pieces, so we just have to pass the turn, or we use a ballista shot, right? Or the rapid fire, to try to get a ballista. But if we had this second awakening, we could do a lot more damage with Haru in that turn. So yes, we'll have to wait and see where the the universal dupe item comes from within the seasonal that we get, right? Where everyone's going to get 2, but then it comes back to a question of, well, who do I want to use that on? Who is going to get my universal dupe? Because we only get 2 of them for the entire season. And again, that's very good for unlocking, you know, some key things for, in Haru's case, a new play style that you can unlock. And then the other ones, just really quick, damage from lift anchor increases from 70 to 100%, so just 30% is really nice. Power Strike deals 100% damage, and the damage increase per beneficial effect is increased to plus 20%. Sure, right? You get the basic improved stacks here at 4 and 5, right? Or for this one, for the Anchor Shot and Power Supply, right? More damage stacking. And then at 6, the damage reduction for Anchor Shot used with insufficient cost is changed to 20% per 1 spent. So this is really weird, again, coming from other gachas where they put so much emphasis in the 6th versus the 2nd. Here in Chaos Zero Nightmare, it does seem flipped. So I do like that, at least at a high level, that they made it a little bit better from each side of it, but something to keep in mind that the most value from this kit is really going to come from E2, and then after that it does fall off quite considerably when we compare them 1 to 1. So with that out of the way, that brings us just to some very quick team combination notes that I want to make. So if you have Kalipe, right, one thing, the most obvious thing maybe to note here is that you get a lot of value out of Vulture Ejection with Haru because she's always going to be casting this for free. One of the downsides is that when we consider something like Rally, you know, you're not going to get the draw off of one of Haru's effects. You're not going to have as much draw. This does pull you a little bit less of a draw engine compared to, say, if this was Veronica, which we'll cover shortly. And Rally will instead draw you into the Vulture Ejections, which, you know, most often you're going to find out that this is just fine because you want more defensive stuff. You're just trying to survive. And it turns out, as we know, that Kalipe is a very good defensive and offensive unit, so you don't hate seeing this. So from a defensive standpoint, what I always love to see is copying Vulture Ejection, getting more copies of them, and then also trying to copy Rally if you can, just to go through your deck a little bit faster. When it comes to more of a, I need a defensive option, and understanding that you're just always running Mika because Haru is very AP heavy, Kalipe gets the gold star here because you get so much value out of the, what they now call heaven triggers instead of celestial. So Kalipe is just going to be the MVP for that. Your other premium option is going to be Veronica because she just does so much passive damage, and as I talked about earlier, you're going to have ways to just draw extra cards, and when Haru wants to be always finding her Anchor Shot, churning through your deck as fast as possible to find the next Anchor Shot or to find the anchor pointer that allows you to do more damage is going to be very important. So when we think about the turn sensitive content, having something like a Veronica where you have 3 different draw 2 cards, the other one being Sir Kowalski in this instance. And also notably here is that when you draw a skill card, you're getting another free source of damage. So oftentimes in this build, this really says 1 AP, 400% damage minimum, and draw 2 cards. It is just insanely busted what Veronica, you know, allows us access to. But beyond that, if we want to think about who can really work with Haru and just making sure that we're drawing as many cards, believe it or not, there has been some very funny save data that I found on Reddit and what have you, that the guilty pleasure and getting this card in particular copied multiple times is hilarious. It is a 0 draw 3. Yes, it does exhaust itself, so it does thin the deck in that regard. But if you can copy 3 of these and just increase that draw cycling that you're doing, this can go quite the distance and is honestly has been very, very shockingly good. Now, beyond that, it is important to note that for Beryl in particular, is that she does care about her own cards the vast majority of the time. But I do want to give a special shout out here to Unlimited Firepower, which does say damage of the next attack card plus 80%. So when you have a card that is in green text like this and it says attack card, this is going to buff Haru's abilities. Now, unfortunately, again, by the 1-1 comparison, when we have it over here where it says for 1 turn and the attack card is not in the green text, this is only going to work for Barrel's stuff. So from a purely free-to-play standpoint, if you have Barrel plus Mika, again, and with good save data, because both of them are going to be units that you're given to, and you rolled on Haru, you can actually make a pretty decent team comp with this as a Mono Justice team. And keep in mind, in the future, there will be Mono Justice content that we care about, but if you have some of the other, you know, semi-premium options, I guess as we could call them, Nia is really great because she can also just have a lot of draw discard effects as well as just casting stuff for free, which is nice. But the one that I really like otherwise is going to be Cassius, because he just has a lot of cards that can draw for free. And also notably, he has the rally cards, which you can also get. So you can just make his entire deck a 0-cost spam draw, burn through your deck. And because he does have a number of upgrades that you can rely on, you can also thin out his deck considerably while you're trying to lead into these big ramp up turns. So for the 4-star, I was using Cassius for a very long time until I got Veronica, and it works quite well. This does need a little bit more refinement. You're going to want to be later on in the chaos runs to make sure that you're getting the most out of it. But shockingly, you can do a lot with Cassius. And then lastly, I will just go back to my Mika build that I've been using here, is that the rally card is just, do not sleep on it. It's so good. The fact that it gives you the increased action count, which allows you to buy more time before the enemy acts, you can often loop through your entire deck, play a double rally, give your opponent +6 action counts before they can hit you, and you'll eventually dig into your anchor shot to do a lot more damage at the very end. But then otherwise, right, the biggest thing is that Mika is just going to give us the action points that we need, because very often we do want to be on a 4 action point turn to get the absolute most out of anchor shot. And well, as of the recording and as of today, Mika is ultimately going to be, you know, the MVP of that. So with that, we are now going to get into my final thoughts with Haru and just talk about her overall. Now, yes, she is a justice damage dealer, which is important for as you're going through the various chaos runs to have a little bit of a easier time farming them. It's also worth noting that yes, they did make this you know, a gotcha character that is focused around the Chaos 5 world, which has a shield heavy buff, but you can also just avoid those shield heavy units if you really want to. And then instead, you know, with Dimensional Dusk, once it rotates, while yes, it does have a very heavy single target focus, it is very likely that the next Dimensional Dusk will move on to whatever the new banner character is. So do I think Haru is a must-pull character for someone who is only free to play? Absolutely not. Yes, she does excel at breaking shields, which is very nice to have as, again, a quality of life for clearing Chaos 5, but ultimately there are other options that you can rely on if you are clearing through that. And then likely we will see the next banner character that will, you know, work itself and most likely land very well into the Chaos 5 territory. And again, if you really have to, you can level up Barrel. While is a little bit slower, she does work into that build up strategy of burning through your deck, but she does have the retain mechanic, meaning you're ultimately going to want someone more like Orlea to buff up Barrel's cards and then have these big damage turns, where Haru, by comparison, definitely has that 5-star fuel upgrade where you just get that damage for free for what it feels like. So overall, I am very happy with it because for me personally, I do love her big hammer, meaty swing style, but I can definitely understand where it's going to fall a little bit short for some other players. So let me know your thoughts. Are you a fan of Haru? Do you want to see more guides like this in the future? Is there a certain section I should have, you know, built out a little bit more? Definitely let me know in the comments below, because it does help me get into the content and making sure that I'm providing the best stuff I can for all of you. But until next time, my friends, stay safe, stay hydrated, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.